Desire does not vanish with age. It transforms, deepens, and sharpens into something richer than the fleeting flames of youth. Women over 50 carry within them a magnetic force that defies stereotypes, a power forged not in smooth skin or naive longing, but in wisdom, scars, and unapologetic authenticity. Attraction in this stage of life is no longer about being chosen. It is about choosing. It is not the performance of beauty, but the embodiment of truth. And that truth unsettles, excites, and liberates all at once, the kind of desire no culture, no age, no man can contain. Desire in its truest form has never belonged to youth alone. Our culture worships the 20-something glow, the unlined face, the taut body that seems to signal fertility, vitality, and endless possibility. But this worship blinds us to a deeper truth. The psychology of desire matures, and in women over 50 it becomes something extraordinary. Where once attraction might have been tangled with insecurity, with the need for validation, with the unconscious hunger to be approved of, now it emerges stripped of illusions. Women at this stage of life no longer beg for love to legitimize them. Instead, they embody a kind of sovereignty that is magnetic precisely because it cannot be easily swayed or owned. Carl Jung's concept of individuation offers a profound lens to understand this transformation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, of reconciling the conscious and unconscious, of integrating shadow and light, of stepping into one's truest self. For many women, the years before 50 are consumed by roles: daughter, partner, mother, caretaker, worker. Each role demands sacrifice, a fragmenting of the self in service of others. Desire during these years often reflects that fragmentation. It is shaped by duty, by expectations, by what one is allowed to want, rather than what one deeply craves. But as the years unfold and roles shift, children leave home, relationships end or evolve, careers stabilize or conclude, space is created, silence emerges, and within that silence, the whispers of the self grow louder. Desire resurfaces, not as a shallow urge to please, but as a profound longing for authenticity. Attraction too transforms. It is no longer rooted in surface qualities, but in resonance. A woman over 50 is not pulled toward appearances alone. She is drawn to depth, to presence, to integrity. Her attraction is laser sharp. She sees through masks quickly, discards pretense ruthlessly, and refuses to invest her energy in illusions. This clarity is precisely what makes women over 50 so misunderstood. Many men, and even younger women, assume desire fades with age. They confuse disinterest in shallow pursuits with the death of passion. But in truth, passion at this stage is more alive than ever. It simply has no patience for games. A woman over 50 is not chasing butterflies of infatuation. She is cultivating the fire of true connection. She knows her own body, her rhythms, her needs. She understands that desire is not merely physical, but profoundly psychological. Attraction begins in the mind, in the exchange of energy, in the recognition of shared truth. What unsettles others is the power embedded in this desire. In her youth, a woman's attraction was often framed as passive. She was desired, she was chosen, she was the recipient of male attention. Now she becomes the chooser. She knows what she wants and what she will not tolerate. She is not afraid to walk away from anything less than reciprocity. And this is where Carl Jung's warning becomes relevant. What we repress in ourselves, we project onto others. For decades, society has repressed the truth of female desire after midlife. It has projected invisibility onto women, claiming they no longer matter, no longer glow, no longer attract. But this projection says more about society's fear than women's reality. The fear is this: a woman over 50 is not easily controlled. She cannot be manipulated by flattery, deceived by false promises, or tamed by the threat of abandonment. Her solitude has taught her resilience. Her scars have given her wisdom. Her years have armed her with discernment, and so her desire becomes threatening because it is not directed by need but by choice. This is attraction at its most dangerous, an attraction that is not desperate but deliberate. Think of how many myths portray older women as witches, sirens, or dangerous seductresses. Beneath the caricature lies a cultural anxiety, the recognition that a woman who knows her own desire is powerful, even uncontrollable. She cannot be reduced to fertility alone. She cannot be diminished to youth alone. She becomes an archetype of raw, unapologetic vitality. And that vitality, while invisible to those who only value surface beauty, is magnetic to those who see beyond it. It is no coincidence that many women over 50 describe feeling both invisible and freer than ever. The invisibility is cultural. Advertisements, media, and shallow social attention shift to younger faces. But the freedom is psychological. No longer under the spotlight of external validation, women rediscover themselves. They dress for comfort and expression rather than for approval. They pursue interests not to impress but to fulfill. They embrace their bodies not as objects to be displayed, but as vessels of lived experience. And this very freedom becomes attractive in ways the culture cannot measure. Attraction is energy, not age. When a woman carries herself with ease, when she radiates acceptance of herself, when she no longer hides nor apologizes, she draws others in. The magnetism is subtler but stronger, less about spectacle and more about gravity. It is the allure of someone who is whole, who does not cling, who does not beg. In Jungian terms, this is the anima fully realized, the feminine principle integrated, alive, commanding respect. To men who have not done their own inner work, this can feel intimidating. They may misinterpret her independence as coldness, her standards as arrogance, her solitude as rejection. But to those who have walked their own path of individuation, her presence is exhilarating. The dance of attraction at this stage becomes one of equals, two complete beings meeting not to fill each other's emptiness, but to share their abundance. And yet, the truth about desire in women over 50 is not only about relationships, it is about desire for life itself. Freed from certain constraints, women often describe a renewed zest for travel, for creativity, for learning, for sensuality. Desire becomes multidimensional, no longer tethered only to romance or sex, but to the full spectrum of experience. A walk at dawn, a painting class, a deep conversation, a moment of stillness, all become infused with meaning. This is not diminished desire. It is expanded desire. It is attraction to life in its raw, unfiltered form. In this way, women over 50 become models for what desire can be when stripped of illusions. They teach us that attraction is not merely a matter of youth or beauty, but of alignment with the self. They show that longing does not end with age, but that it becomes deeper, more intentional, more honest. And perhaps this is the secret power that Carl Jung hinted at. When the unconscious is integrated, when the shadow is faced, when the self is owned, desire is no longer a chain but a compass. If you strip away the myths society clings to, you begin to see something extraordinary about women in their 50s and beyond. They are not living the end of desire, but a renaissance of it. The irony is that while culture often portrays them as invisible, in reality they are glowing with a vitality that is not dependent on youthful charm. It is a vitality born of self-acceptance, and that is far more magnetic than any fleeting standard of beauty. When a woman reaches this stage, she understands desire not just as an impulse, but as a language. It is the language of her body, telling her what feels alive, what feels nourishing, what feels authentic. In youth, that language can be drowned out by noise, by comparisons, by pressure to compete, by the fear of not being enough. At 50 and beyond, the noise often quiets. The ears of the soul open, the whispers become clear. She hears her body say, "I crave freedom. I crave truth. I crave intimacy that honors me as I am." This intimacy may come from a partner, but it can also come from solitude, from deep friendships, from creative pursuits. Attraction at this stage is also less performative. A younger woman may have been conditioned to believe that being desired means playing a role, dressing a certain way, acting a certain way, appearing effortless while exhausting herself to meet expectations. But women over 50 grow weary of performance. They no longer want to live on a stage where someone else writes the script. They prefer authenticity, and that authenticity becomes its own form of attraction. People are drawn to those who are unapologetically themselves, because in their presence, others feel permission to do the same. This is why women in their 50s often say they attract a different kind of energy. They no longer pull in those who want surface connection. They repel them. Instead, they draw those who are seeking depth, honesty, and resonance. The frivolous suitors fall away, and what remains is possibility rooted in substance. In many ways, this makes desire more selective. but also more powerful. Attraction becomes like a finely tuned instrument, sensitive to even the smallest dissonance. And here lies another truth. Desire in women over 50 often comes with boundaries, where once they may have endured relationships that drained them, tolerated neglect, or accepted crumbs in the name of love. Now they know better. They recognize red flags instantly. They are less willing to compromise their peace for the promise of connection. And this boundary setting is not coldness, it is wisdom. It protects their energy, ensuring that when they do invest in someone or something, it is aligned with their truth. This boundary itself is deeply attractive because it signals self-respect. Those who cannot match it feel repelled. Those who can feel invited. Carl Jung would remind us that desire at this stage is also about the integration of the shadow. For many women, the shadow side of desire, the parts they were taught to repress, such as assertiveness, sensuality, independence, even anger, begins to surface. A younger woman may have feared being too much. A woman over 50 begins to embrace her too muchness, recognizing it as her authenticity. She no longer edits herself to fit into a mold. She stops apologizing for wanting what she wants. And when desire is allowed to fully integrate, it no longer leaks out in hidden ways. It becomes conscious, deliberate, powerful. Consider the archetype of the wise woman or crone in mythology. She is not stripped of desire. She embodies it differently. She represents cycles, transitions, and the wisdom that comes from living fully. She may not crave the fleeting rush of infatuation, but she hungers for connection that honors her soul. She may not dress to impress others, but she adorns herself in ways that please her spirit. Her desire is not for validation, but for alignment. And this archetype terrifies those who cling to superficiality because it cannot be controlled. Society often fails to prepare men for this version of female desire. Many men grow up believing that attraction is tied to youth, and when faced with a woman over 50 who radiates confidence, they feel disoriented. They expect neediness but find self-sufficiency. They expect compliance but encounter boundaries. They expect fading sexuality but meet unashamed sensuality. For some, this is threatening. For others, it is exhilarating. The men who cannot adapt retreat into stereotypes, while the men who can embrace growth discover a partnership unlike anything they've known. But here's the essential point. The truth about desire in women over 50 is not limited to romance. It spills into every area of life. They desire freedom of expression, unburdened joy, meaningful community, and experiences that ignite their creativity. They may start new careers, travel alone, pick up forgotten passions, or dive into spiritual practices. Attraction then becomes a broader phenomenon. They are attracted not only to people but to life itself, and this attraction radiates outward, pulling others into their orbit. What many people miss is that this attraction often doesn't conform to conventional standards. A woman over 50 may not look like the airbrushed ideals of youth culture, but her allure is undeniable. It comes from her gaze, steady and knowing. It comes from the way she carries herself, rooted and grounded. It comes from her laughter, unafraid of wrinkles, full of life. Attraction at this stage is not about perfection. It is about presence. And presence is infinitely more compelling than perfection. To understand this psychology more deeply, imagine the difference between a flame and an ember. The flame burns fast, bright, but often shallow. It dazzles but can easily extinguish. An ember, on the other hand, glows steadily. It carries heat and depth. It can reignite a fire with the right breath. Women over 50 embody the ember. Their desire is steady, enduring, potent. It does not scream, it hums. It does not grasp. It invites, and those who are attuned to it discover a richness that fleeting flames could never offer. This is why many women say they feel more themselves, more alive, more sensual after 50 than at any other point. It is not because age grants some magical gift, but because time strips away illusions. They know who they are, they know what they want, and they no longer fear the cost of being authentic. That authenticity infuses their desire with a power that is irresistible, not to everyone but to those who matter. Desire, then, is not gone. It has evolved. It is sharper, deeper, wider. It is less about being chosen and more about choosing. It is less about survival and more about thriving. It is less about fulfilling someone else's fantasy and more about honoring one's own truth. And when women live from that place, they embody a freedom that is as alluring as it is unstoppable. The truth about desire and attraction in women over 50 is that it refuses to die, refuses to shrink, refuses to conform to the narrow boxes society has built for it. Instead, it expands into something fuller, richer, and far more authentic than the glossy illusions of youth. The world often tells women that desire peaks early and fades fast. But women themselves, especially those who cross the threshold of 50, know better. They know that what fades is not desire, but the fear of owning it. They know that what disappears is not attraction, but the compulsion to prove it to others. At this stage, women step into a profound paradox. They are told they are invisible, yet they feel more powerful than ever. They are told their time is over, yet they feel like life is just beginning. They are told desire belongs to the young, yet they discover their longing has deepened into something unshakable. And in this paradox lies freedom, because when the external world no longer validates them, they no longer need the external world's permission to desire, to want, to choose. Desire becomes theirs finally and fully. Carl Jung would say that this is individuation at its finest, the moment when a person integrates the shadow and emerges whole. For women, much of that shadow has always been tied to desire. They were told it was dangerous, selfish, too much. They were told to silence it, to tuck it away beneath roles of mother, wife, caretaker, nurturer. But after 50, that shadow can no longer be contained. It bursts forth not as reckless rebellion, but as a grounded, unapologetic claim. This is who I am. This is what I want. This is the life I will live. What makes this desire so magnetic is that it is not desperate. It does not beg to be met. It waits to be matched. A woman over 50 does not chase love as though her survival depends on it. She seeks love only if it enriches her, only if it honors her wholeness. This is why many men misunderstand her. They confuse her independence with rejection, her discernment with arrogance, her solitude with emptiness. But the reality is the opposite. She is full. She is sovereign. She does not seek completion because she is already complete. And this completeness changes everything about attraction. When a woman does not need to be chosen to feel alive, she becomes radiant in a way that is undeniable. Her presence speaks louder than her appearance. Her energy carries more weight than her performance. She does not attract by trying. She attracts by being. That is the secret society cannot easily digest. Attraction after 50 is not about adornment, but authenticity. And authenticity is irresistible to those who are awake enough to recognize it. In this sense, women over 50 hold a mirror to the rest of us. They remind us that desire is not owned by youth or bound by time. They remind us that attraction is not a trick of biology, but a resonance of spirit. They remind us that freedom and longing are not opposites but partners, because only when you are free to walk away can you truly choose to stay. Their psychology is not a mystery to be solved, but a lesson to be learned, that the deepest desires are not about filling emptiness, but about expanding abundance. The culture may still label them invisible, but invisibility can be a kind of superpower. It strips away noise and expectation. It allows women to move through the world unseen by those who do not matter, and deeply seen by those who do. It frees them from the burden of pleasing strangers and gifts them the joy of pleasing themselves. And in that freedom, they create a new definition of attraction, one rooted not in youth, not in performance, not in approval, but in truth. The conclusion is this: women over 50 are not at the end of desire. They are at its beginning, not the beginning of naive infatuation, but the beginning of real, unshakable, fearless desire. They embody a fire that is slower but hotter, quieter but steadier, smaller but infinitely stronger. They show us that attraction is not about playing a role, but about stepping fully into the self. They remind us that life, even in its later chapters, can be filled with hunger, with curiosity, with joy. And perhaps that is the greatest truth of all. Women over 50 are no longer chasing love because they have found something even more powerful. They have found themselves. Their desire is no longer a cry for rescue. It is a celebration of existence. Their attraction is no longer a strategy for survival. It is a force of nature. And once you see it, once you really see it, you realize that it was never invisible. It was only hidden from those who were too blind, too fearful, or too superficial to look deeper. So the next time someone dares to say that desire belongs only to the young, Let them meet the gaze of a woman over 50 who knows who she is. Let them feel the gravity of her presence, the steadiness of her longing, the radiance of her authenticity. Let them see what attraction looks like when it is free of illusion, and what desire feels like when it is no longer afraid. Because that is the truth, the kind of truth that cannot be silenced, cannot be diminished, and cannot be ignored.